Last Shabbat, the world lost one of the great rabbis of this generation, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. His writings and teachings have inspired so many of us, and his loss is devastating for the Jewish community and beyond. This week, I'd like to share excerpts of what he wrote 1 year ago on this week's portion of Chayei Sarah. I believe one of the best ways we can honor him is by teaching Torah in his name. So this is what Rabbi Sacks wrote on this Shabbat last year. The name of our parsha seems to embody a paradox. It is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, but it begins with the death of Sarah. What is more, towards the end, it records the death of Abraham. Why is a parsha about death called life? The answer, it seems to me, is that not always, but often, death and how we face death is a commentary on life and how we live it. Which brings us to a deeper paradox. The first sentence of this week's Parsha, Chayei Sarah, is Sarah's lifetime was 127 years, the years of Sarah's life. A well-known comment by Rashi on the apparently superfluous phrase, the years of Sarah's life, states the word years is repeated and without a number to indicate that they were all equally good. How could anyone say the years of Sarah's life were equally good? Twice, first in Egypt and then in Gerar, she was persuaded by Abraham to say that she was his sister rather than his wife, and then taken to a royal harem, a situation fraught with moral hazard. There were the years when, despite God's repeated promise of many children, she was infertile, unable to have even a single child. There was a time when she persuaded Abraham to take her handmaid, Hagar, and have a child by her, which caused her great strife of the spirit. These things constituted a life of uncertainty and decades of unmet hopes. How is it remotely plausible to say that all of Sarah's years were equally good? That is Sarah. About Abraham, the text is similarly puzzling. Immediately after the account of his purchase of a burial plot for Sarah, we read, Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and God had blessed Abraham, bakol, with everything. This too is strange. 7 times God had promised Abraham the land of Canaan. Yet when Sarah died, he did not own a single plot of land in which to bury her, and had to undergo an elaborate, even humiliating negotiation with the Hittites, forced to admit at the outset that I am a stranger and temporary resident among you. How can the text say that God had blessed Abraham with everything? Equally haunting is its account of Abraham's death, perhaps the most serene in the Torah. Quote, Abraham breathed his last and died at a good age, old and satisfied. He was gathered to his people, unquote. He had been promised that he would become a great nation, the father of many nations, that he would inherit the land. Not one of these promises had been fulfilled in his lifetime. How then was he satisfied? The answer, again, is that to understand a death, we have to understand a life. Abraham and Sarah were among the supreme examples in all history of what it is to have a why in life. The entire course of their lives came as a response to a call, a divine voice that told them to leave their home and family, set out for an unknown destination, go to live in a land where they would be strangers, abandon every conventional form of security, and have the faith to believe that by living by the standards of righteousness and justice, they would be taking the first step to establishing a nation, a land, a faith, and a way of life that would be a blessing to all humankind. The Midrash fills in the narrative gaps. And nowhere is this more pointed than in the case of the emotions of the key figures. We do not know what Abraham or Isaac felt as they walked toward Mount Moriah. We do not know what Sarah felt when she entered the harems, first of Pharaoh, then of Avimelech of Gerar. With some conspicuous exceptions, we hardly know what any of the Torah's characters felt. Which is why the 2 explicit statements about Abraham, that God blessed him with everything, and that he ended life old and satisfied, are so important. And when Rashi says that all of Sarah's years were equally good, he is attributing to her what the biblical text attributes to Abraham, namely a serenity in the face of death that came from a profound tranquility in the face of life. Abraham knew that everything that happened to him, even the bad things, were part of the journey on which God had sent him and Sarah, and he had the faith to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, fearing no evil, knowing that God was with him. Abraham and Sarah survived whatever fate threw at them, however much it seemed to derail their mission. And despite everything, they found serenity at the end of their lives. They knew that what makes a life satisfying is not external, but internal, a sense of purpose, mission, being called, summoned, of starting something that would be continued by those who came after them, of bringing something new into the world by the way they lived their lives. What mattered was the inside, not the outside, their faith, not their often troubled circumstances. I believe that faith helps us to find the why that allows us to bear almost any how. The serenity of Sarah's and Abraham's death was external testimony to how they lived. Zichrono livracha, may Rabbi Sachs's memory forever be a blessing. Shabbat shalom.